camera here, but nobody is recorded, so, and it's not shifting, so if you don't want to be recorded, then you're not going to be recorded because you're not going to be recorded, but if you want to be on the camera, just come over here and wave. Yeah, it maybe is important to say that if we have this moment of where we are taking the stage, that we want to make space, of course, for the fact that actually bodies are here. And especially now in the pandemic time, of course, bodies are here, and this means something in many different ways, and for many different people it means many different things. And so if at any time you want to lie down, or you want to stand, or you want to walk away, or you need to make some noises, feel super invited and welcome to do so. We don't want to reproduce this idea of you listening versus us speaking, and also you should know how you concentrate best, right? If you even want to concentrate, that's also up to you. Would you like to do, of course not mandatory, but would you like to do a little round of bringing you into this vocal space by maybe saying hello and saying your name? Of course you can also make up a name if that's what you prefer, but we would like to share this reading space a little more. Is that okay with you? I'll leave it up to you who starts.
Hello. My name is Kuka, and I use all pronouns. Yeah. And I'm from Portugal.
Hi, my name is George, and I'm from Portugal too. And the pronouns he.
Mariana, she, her, from Portugal. Flavia, she, her, from Brazil.
I'm Shane, he, they. I'm from Portugal, not from Lisbon, but currently in Lisbon for 10 years sometimes. Ready? Here.
I'm Felipe from Portugal.
I'm Serena, Brazilian, living in Portugal.
What's your name?
Sabrina.
Sabrina.
I'm Laura, they, them, and I'm based in Los Angeles.
I'm Paloma, she, they, and we're from Spain.
This is Taco, take them, from Portugal. And I'm Felipe, I'm she, they, and from Barcelona.
Hi, I'm Inês, and I use she. And yeah, and maybe this is also a moment to thank Gemma from Zaratan, who read this space. They also have a residency. If you want to talk to Gemma and learn more about this space, yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for being here in such a difficult time for traveling. And it's a pleasure to be able to stay together and have a conversation about important topics.
So I will bring here.
No, here.
Did you want me to start saying? Yeah. Okay. So basically, we propose to do a bit of a conversation where we have agreed that we can interrupt each other at all times, which is an extended invitation to you, of course. If you want to ask questions or comment on something, feel free to
Or interrupt us at any time.
or interrupt with whatever. Please do so. Yeah, I wanted to share maybe a few thoughts to start us out with, so that somebody starts, about this little book. So Playing Monogamy refers to this question of monogamy being a script, being a form, a play in that sense, referencing of course to some elements of performativity. And I mostly focused in the book on denaturalizing monogamy, while also proposing forms of non-monogamy. And I would say that for me, non-monogamy, I use non-monogamy and not polyamory, which is maybe a more common term, especially in North American context. But for me, I really try to use non-monogamy because polyamory has a very specific reference in the sense that it indeed refers to mostly North American polyamorous communities, and it's much more recent, where non-monogamy could sort of refer to any moment of, or any peoples also living in non-monogamous ways. And also defining what all these forms of non-monogamy could be, where polyamory has much more in itself also already a script. So for example, when I'm thinking about non-monogamy, one of the researches that I learned a lot from would be the politics of passion from Gloria Becker. Gloria Becker is an anthropologist. She's an Afro-Surinamese Dutch person. Suriname is part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I'm doing this, but it's actually true. But I also want to complicate this word of kingdom, and it's in South America, and it's of course it's colonized, etc. And Gloria Becker did participatory research as someone from Suriname with Mati culture women. So women living with women. Mati comes actually from the transatlantic slave route because Mati comes from maatje, which refers to, in a way, it refers to buddy, but it also refers to buddies on the ship. So maatje is like scheepsmaatje, which means ship buddy. So it means that it's a word that's somehow claimed that comes from Dutch, and then it's creolized into Mati. And the politics of passion is a book that Gloria Becker wrote, speaking about the Mati culture, where the women living with women in a very intergenerational way, also a very big age gaps. And also, it's not an identitary form of expressing sexuality. So, for example, you do not say, I am lesbian, for example, or I am gay, but you do the Mati work. So, there is an element of doing your sexuality, not being your sexuality, or the question is also, is it yours? Because the Mati work is based on the ontology or cosmology of the Winti spirits. This is how Gloria describes it. I should continuously mention that I'm referencing her. Where the Winti spirits is, well, please don't take my word for it, but like the most easy way to describe it would be that it's a polytheistic model, so to say, where you would be visited by different gods. So you're never, of course, stuck to one god only. The spirits move like the wind. Winti literally comes from wind. So you could be visited by a god who likes to lay down with women, if we use this binary system. And at that moment, that would mean that you express your sexuality in such a way. Where if you are visited by a different god that likes something else sexually, this would maybe mean that you, express your sexuality differently. I'm already realizing that I'm now narrowing it down to sexuality, because actually the Mati work incorporates a lot more. It's also a lot about value. It's about value. There's even this expression where a coin passes through many hands without losing value. So promiscuity is not something where your value decreases. So here you of course see already this Western notion of promiscuity sort of giving up your value, right? Like slut shaming, you're giving up your value through this. So I'm sort of elaborating on the Mati work just because it kind of comes to me right now. I'm visited always by the Mati work, but this is maybe to say as an introduction to the fact that why I use non-monogamy more than polyamory, because it incorporates all these different histories, and not just the histories that we know, the histories that are documented in some way or another, especially in legible ways, or that we have agreed that are legible, but also the histories, the intimacies that are actually not named, that are not legible, which immediately brings me to one of the elements of why I'm so interested in non-monogamy, and why monogamy and non-monogamy is indeed not just about sexuality, but really about systems of value and validation. And to say it very concretely, simply the ways that not just that we live, but the way that we allow ourselves to live in relationship to the attribution of value. Why am I saying this? Because monogamy, for example, has been used in anthropology as a measurement to identify people either as, and I'm going to use this language in an extrematized way, just to do it quickly and clearly, and to cut away from it, maybe. But this idea of civilized, right, where the monogamous couple proposes that people are civilized, versus non-monogamy or illegible intimacies or promiscuous intimacies, or simply unknowable in the colonizer's eye. And the colonizer and the anthropologist, I'm sort of equating them right now. Monogamy has been really used as this measure of chivalry. It's also something, maybe it's interesting in this context also to think of somebody like Brigitte Vassallo, who's a Spanish writer and activist on non-monogamy, who really goes into, and if we use references, by the way, that are not really clear and you want to know them later, we can of course share them. But Brigitte really goes into also the ways that, for example, the how do you say, like a polyamorous marriage? What was it called again?
Polygamy.
Polygamy, yeah, thank you.
You wrote the book on this.
Yeah, that is an argument of expertise that I'm not taking. Like the polygamy model in Islam, for example, and the ways that this is, like this focus, like Brigitte really writes about this focus on the numbers, right? So instead of criticizing the marriage structure, the patriarchal structure of marriage, and the way that it connects intimacy to property immediately, this is not being criticized in the Northwestern European context. What is criticized is this idea of polygamy in an Islamic context, for example, where it's really about the numbers. So the focus on the fact that it has to be a singular in order to be civil, in order to be in a way that is respectful somehow, then becomes also a way to avoid or to deny feminist criticisms, right? Because then you get this where it's like, oh, monogamy is the feminist, and I mean by feminist in this context, the most gender equal way. Like, this is the only utopian that we are offered is monogamy, monogamous marriage. Because imagine that we would be living in a polygamous marriage situation, which would be so backward, right? Like this idea. So the ways that monogamy is implemented and the way that it relates to power, and also what worlds we imagine possible, that is something that for me has been really important to think about non-monogamy. And of course the frustration that comes from that is that often when you write about or say something about monogamy or non-monogamy, you're immediately sort of like shoved into the sex and romance corner, where actually I'm saying we, from a plural perspective, I would like to bring out the romance, the sexual, the relating into all aspects of life. So for example, monogamy or non-monogamy allows, and just interrupt me, no? Yeah, but you know this. In my thinking, really allows for like a potentially, and it's never enough, right? It's never enough to just hold the flag of non-monogamy, but a potentially anti-capitalist way of living, because monogamy also leads to the couple form that then is addressed in commercials, that is addressed not just in commercials, but also literally in the selling of houses, allowing mortgages to come up, but also literally the way that life life phases, different age phases, are expected for you. Like, so first you go crazy because, or first you go wild because you're in your beginning 20s, and then you start towards dating, and then you start towards serious, right? This idea of serious also. So you're acquiring this identity that is sort of projected and predicted, and this predictability allows for an economic, how would you say that? Prediction, I would say.
Order.
Order, yeah.
But in both, even in the both ways of the word order, like order has a system that is in place in how you identify reality, but also order has the commands to maintain that system, right? You always kind of feel inadequate and unfit if you're not following the order as you find it already. Mm-hmm. It's again one of these performative acts in which you are ordered to reproduce the order that you find already. Mm-hmm. Can I say a couple of things?
Yeah, for sure.
I was thinking about the Mati example that you were giving that I don't know other than from your book. I was thinking of Audre Lorde, who has this amazing book called Zami, Another Way of Spelling My Name. And in it, she talks about her Caribbean family and her mother, and talks about the way in which a similar system would happen, which the husbands of the families would go and would stay at the sea fishing for long periods of time, and women would congregate and create certain kinds of bonds that they would themselves would perceive as being stronger than the ones that they had in marriage, right? And Audre Lorde does like a really amazing play here, saying, I want to say something that this woman would dread hearing me say, and in fact would prefer to die before hearing this. But this for me is what it means to be a lesbian, right? Like, these are women that certainly would refuse this captivity completely. But what she's doing here as well for me is this kind of recovery of homosexuality, female homosexuality, but just really like lesbianism at the time has a political identity, and not just has a sexual identity as we would understand it nowadays. So rather than being something that can be capitalized or mercantilized as new forms of reproduction of sameness, as we would see with gay homosexuality today, that has a whole like market for itself, they become forms of care, and they become forms of being together, and they become deviations themselves, like not just different forms of movements away from patriarchal forms of organization. I think one of the things that is really nice about this book is that you propose some opening of paths that go in that direction, in which monogamy is also like, you don't present another model to come and replace monogamy. You put at stake monogamy as the model that is ruling society. Right? I was reading the book, and the sentence from Lord of the Rings came to mind, like one ring to rule them all, like the ring here being monogamy. And I was thinking that it so well encapsulates many things that you do in the book, because I'm sorry, you'd like to say your book is actually reduced to a sentence from Lord of the Rings. But on the one hand, you have exactly what you're saying, which is it would seem that all aspects of society are ordered and organized through monogamy at a certain point. And once you start seeing, you cannot stop seeing it. Once you start seeing it in the commercials, in the discounts, in the access to the hospital, in the institutions, and then as I hope to talk at some point, also like even space and time are rules to a certain extent by monogamy and the couple form. And then the other way, like rule actually has a form of measurement, right? Like one ring to rule them all, because everything starts being measured in relation to that rule, in relation to that measurement, so that even forms of civilization or uncivilization, of having progressed or being in a previous stage of societal development, becomes measured by monogamy. Everything else can only be described like in relation to monogamy, and we are unable to see like perspectives that don't come from this. I don't know if this makes some sense.
Yeah.
It also becomes like this kind of focus on undoing the invisible center of congregation of forms of relation becomes, I feel, on your behalf, like an invitation. Because you're not asking you to subscribe to a specific form of relationality that you've come to substitute it. Like, you're invited to experiment and to find in our lives already the things that are not monogamous, that will always be there. Like, someone that doesn't want to be pressured into having sex when they're 17 is already part of this like non-monogamous experimentation of not wanting to go through these stages of life, which you were referring to, for example. Like you were saying, you say at some point, non-monogamy is just as relevant for those who'd like to sleep with one person only, or who would rather sleep with no one at all. And I don't know, that was something that I really, really enjoyed in this book. It's welcoming.
Yeah, I think what the last bit that you said, and again, everybody's invited to interrupt it, or the church smell. The last thing that you said, reminds me again of, and maybe also restating that, which maybe have become an obsession of mine, because what I find the biggest danger in the book itself is this sort of potential for a neoliberal individualism, where it's like, oh, just do your thing. Because literally, like, on a general audience level, this is how it's read, right? Like, if you say anything that's non-normative, there's a hijacking where it's like, oh, so you're like somebody who doesn't, think about confines or borders. Lovely.
How free.
You're so free. And this is exactly, it's like, it's basically the opposite, right? You're saying, no, there is no such thing as freedom, because the structures have been designed for non-freedom, or for capturing, or for freedom for only this very small part. Because it's also interesting when you say like this one ring to rules all, there's an element, and we do this to each other all the time, right? That it becomes, in a way that, okay, monogamy is the norm. This is very clear, like it's on a very structural, deep level, on an architectural level, on a level of access. I really like that you brought in also the aspect of hospitals, right? Like this, immediately, like you see how care is institutionalized, but also the barricading of care in hospitals when you're not married, for example. And then you get this thing where, okay, same-sex marriage is the solution because you can access the hospital. What kind of a solution is that? It's an individualist solution, right? The same with, of course, the inheritance rights that you gain. Who's gonna gain from inheritance rights through marriage is people who have money.
Yeah.
So then we get to the same-sex marriage, which is blah, blah, blah. But there's an element of this idea that it is the norm, monogamy, but I think we also have to continuously remind us that it's actually not the norm. Similarly to whiteness, right? Because I think monogamy and whiteness, in that sense, continuously collapse. Because even though monogamy affects all of us, some are much more affected by monogamy than some others, where I'm including myself as white. I might be like talking about it a lot, but I'm less affected by the norm of monogamy because my safety, my like physical safety, is in that sense not touched by it. Again, people will say like, "Oh, you're so free, how nice! Write a book." Versus
You did.
yeah, well, versus. I'm thinking here of Saidiya Hartman's work, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, where